Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we continue our season previews with good old Rocky Top, the Tennessee Volunteers. Can they get past the Nico drama? Are they still capable of making a push in the SEC? We will find out, but first, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you think of the Tennessee Volunteers in 2025. And with that, let's jump into it, starting with their schedule this season. They open the year off in Atlanta versus the Syracuse Orange in what should be a decently favorable neutral site matchup. At home, they face Georgia, UAB, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico State, and Vanderbilt. Not the worst slate we've seen thus far, but on the road, they will face Mississippi State, Alabama, Kentucky, and Florida. Two big matchups there with Alabama and Florida on the road. And it is the SEC, so you can't sleep on either Mississippi State or Kentucky. But all around, not the worst schedule we've seen thus far, like I said, but with a moderately difficult opponent in Syracuse to open the season, followed by Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Florida. There's a lot that could go wrong if they aren't up to speed this year. And with that, let's get into Tennessee's strengths this year. And first, I want to highlight the play in the trenches. Now, it is important to note that the Vols are playing a bit of plug and play on offensive line, but on paper, it is still a very good unit. They bring in Wendell Moe and Sam Pendleton from Arizona and Notre Dame to fill in vacancies at both guards. They return Lance Hurd at left tackle and bring in one of the best prospects in the country in David Sanders Jr., a high 5-star player at right tackle. Like I said, on paper, still an amazing unit, still very talented, but with multiple transfers and true freshmen on the offensive line, it's hard to say exactly how cohesive that unit will be. Similar to the defensive line that does lose James Pierce, but they are not short on talent on that side either. Of those players returning this season, they returned 34.5 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, and 24 QB pressures from last year's unit, but more on them in a minute. For the next strength on this team, let's talk about Tennessee's skill positions this year. Now, they obviously take some big hits in this area, like Squirrel White and Chaz Nimrod, both transferring out at receiver, as well as Brew McCoy and Dylan Sampson, both heading to the NFL, but they're still very talented inside and out. You'll see that is a common theme of this video. Running back Star Thomas transfers in from Duke, where he had over 1,000 scrimmage yards and 8 touchdowns in 2024. And he honestly reminds me a bit of Dylan Sampson. He's obviously a bit larger, bigger frame, but he's very powerful, very shifty, has the ability to generate missed tackles, but lacks the overall explosivity of Dylan Sampson last year. Still a really good back overall, and they also retain Peyton Lewis and Deshaun Bishop at running back. It's a very deep unit, returning a good amount of production from last year. Obviously not the guy that you want returning, but still 3 backs with a ton of experience. If they do it by committee, they will be very well off this year, especially with a guy like Star Thomas coming in. They also return Miles Kitzelman at tight end, who was a very underrated tight end overall last year, both as a blocker and a receiver. He was rated as a top 10 most valuable tight end in the sport according to Pro Football Focus, raking in 22 receptions for 300 yards and 5 total touchdowns last season. One of those came as a fullback to highlight his versatility on that offense. And at wide receiver, they also have a ton of talent returning. Mike Matthews is a guy I thought we'd see more of last year. Didn't quite get the reps I thought he would see, but he's still a very talented receiver in that room. They also return Chris Brazzell, Braylon Staley, and incoming wide receiver Amari Jefferson from Alabama, who are all elite to borderline elite weapons at wide receiver. New quarterback Joey Aguilar is going to have a ton of options at that position. But with that, let's look at this team's weaknesses next season. The first and most glaring weakness, in my opinion, is going to be the unfortunate injury of Jermon McCoy. McCoy tore his ACL in off-season training earlier this year, I believe in January, and it's reported that he may be able to return in 2025, but it's not clearly known yet in what capacity. He could be 100% by the start of the season, although that does seem a little bit unlikely. If he's limited to start the year, you have to wonder if his ability to explode to the ball that has made him so great at corner will be affected. Will he be as effective if he isn't 100%, or will the Volunteers have to potentially play without him at the beginning of the year altogether? Neither option is ideal, and I think that secondary could take a a huge step back without him. They're not untalented at that unit, but losing a guy like McCoy who can go one-on-one with the best receivers in the SEC is never going to lend to your success as a unit. And for the second and last weakness of this video, let's take a look at the quarterback situation. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Nico Iamaleava is now a UCLA Bruin, and while in principle it's good to get a guy like that off your roster, in practice it may be a bit more detrimental than it is beneficial for your offense. The Vols take Joey Aguilar from the Bruins, formerly of App State, over the past 2 seasons, who I thought could be one of the best players out of the group of 5 going into last season. He threw for well north of 3,500 passing yards and 33 touchdowns in 2023, but he did take a big step back in 2024, partially due to scheme, but overall he was a lot less efficient throwing the football last season. He ended that campaign with just a 56% completion percentage for just over 3,000 yards and 23 touchdowns with a conference high 14 interceptions to go along with it. He had a lot of trouble reading defenses at a high level last season, which isn't what you want to see as a quarterback jumping into the SEC. Versus an elite Clemson defense, he went 18 of 41 passing, just 44% for 200 yards and a touchdown. Not very efficient there. And he's going to be facing a lot of defenses similar to Clemson in the SEC. And that forces me to wonder how well he can play at Tennessee. And in the worst case scenario, if it doesn't work with him, you have 2 unproven guys behind him in Jake Merlinger and George McIntyre. So not a ton of depth, although those guys are talented. I don't want to say they're bums, just not a ton of proven depth there if, of course, the Joey Aguilar acquisition doesn't work how they want it to, which could end up spelling disaster. And with that, let's jump into this team's grades this year, starting with the offense, which I am giving an 87 flat. May seem a bit harsh, but when you compare these units side by side from last season, the difference is very, very noticeable. No Samson, no Iamaleava, a lot of big names off the offensive line and wide receiver rooms. And while they're still talented, like I've said multiple times in this video, I don't think they're going to be a top unit in the SEC again this year. Unlike the defense, which I am giving a 91.5, in my opinion, still a drop off from where they were last year, but still very solid all around. Obviously losing James Pierce and the uncertainty of Jermon McCoy's return bring this rating down a bit, but they will still field what should be a near elite front 7 with probably still a pretty decent secondary without Jermon McCoy. And as for the specialists, I'm giving them an 88 flat. Punt and kick coverage are about league average last year. Punter Jackson Ross was around 40th in both net and average punt yards, and kicker Max Gilbert went 20 of 26 last year with a long of 52. Absolutely nothing to sneeze at in any of those. Probably not an elite unit all around. They do lose their special teams coordinator, but overall still a very good unit. And as for coaching, we haven't gotten to talk about Josh Heupel and crew in this video just yet. They've done a great job over the past few seasons at reinventing their system seemingly year by year to best fit their players. Would have liked to see them use Nico more aggressively, but I understand Dylan Sampson's essentially an entire offense on his own, so I don't blame them for using him in that way at all. I'm giving this staff a 91, very, very good at an A-, but haven't quite reached that next level in my opinion. And as for the strength of schedule, once again, we're in the SEC. They're going to grade out higher on average than most other schedules, and I'm giving them a 95 flat. Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma, Florida as their toughest opponents. 2 of those 4 on the road. Could be much worse. Could have an extra Texas or Texas A&M, maybe even an LSU or an Ole Miss. But it's still overall going to be a very tough schedule, which brings Tennessee's final overall grade to a 90.5. They're a very good, very talented team overall, but in my opinion, they just lack those elite playmakers on the offense and defense that they had a year ago to really push them over the edge into a playoff team, a 10+ win team. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's take a look at my predictions for this team in 2025. And Tennessee fans, you might want to shield your eyes for this part. I'm setting Tennessee's floor at 5-7. This is a real disaster scenario in my eyes. A lot would have to go wrong for this to happen, but with a new quarterback who regressed in efficiency in the Sun Belt, with a front seven that lacks a premier pass rusher in James Pierce, and with having to replace 1,600 yards and 22 touchdowns at running back, disaster is definitely on the table for the Vols this year. But as for the ceiling, I have Tennessee set at 9-3 in the realm of where they were last season. I don't really see them heavily in the SEC title picture, but could still be a sneaky playoff dark horse. If Joey Aguilar can have a return to form and look like the 2023 version of himself and be better at protecting the football overall, as well as having that defense play like it did last season, this is definitely in the realm of possibility. But that does bring me to my final prediction, which I have set at 7-5. Not an ideal year for Heupel and company. I have them dropping all 4 of their toughest matchups, with the Volunteers losing in the extra game to maybe a Kentucky, Syracuse, or Vanderbilt most likely. And overall, I just have very, very low confidence in this team, to put it frankly. I don't see a world where they don't feel the losses on every unit a decent bit this year, but I very well could be wrong. Wasn't wrong last year, predicted 10-2 for Tennessee, but the past is the past. And be sure to let me know what you think of Tennessee in the comments down below. And with that, thank you for watching. As always, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot, and we will see you in the next one.